Yesterday we talked about a whole bunch of leaks in terms of skins for Smite. Today we're talking about more leaks. This time not skins, but quite a few different other things that are also most certainly of interest for us. The first one is something that Twitter user VexedSamBC found. When he was playing, there was some message in-game, some client message, as we have them a lot at the moment. We had some issue with VGS, for example, with the Xbox players having their full commands written out in chat with every input they do. And similar to that, he had a message that included a few other things regarding crossplay update, crossplay required, and crossplay allowed. And the really interesting thing here was that behind crossplay allowed, it said PL, whatever that may mean, brackets, PC Windows, PC Mac. I honestly don't even know what's going on with the Mac version at this point, but apparently it still exists and can have crossplay as well. Xbox, of course, PS4, Switch, Android, and iOS. So outside of our normal PC and console platforms, there is an option to include mobile gaming. Doesn't include the Windows phones, what a surprise. And what this exactly means is completely open, because this is definitely not a confirmation of mobile Smite being confirmed. Yet at the same time, it's interesting that it's there in the first place. Now, a few things to keep in mind here. Crossplay could be enabled between these platforms for other reasons. It could be because the same crossplay code could be used for other games, like for example Paladins or Ram Royale, and maybe one of them is actually the one that will get an Android version sooner or later, or an iOS version. I don't really know which one, but I can imagine a shooter game being significantly easier for that kind of stuff, because we already kind of know that it exists for Fortnite at least. Another thing that is worth noting here is that for the input, the IN that comes afterwards, there is just KBM and GPD, which is probably keyboard and mouse, and gamepad. There is no touch input, which is probably what you would want with Android or iOS. That is unless you attach some external controller to it. But that's not all that we have to consider here. It's also worth keeping in mind that the Unreal Engine actually allows games to be designed for mobile. In Unreal 4, you can use the same base code basically to create a mobile game, and I think it makes transferring games relatively easy. However, this is for Unreal 4. Smite uses a modified version of the Unreal 3 engine, and I am not quite sure how transferable that one is to mobile. It could be or it could not be, depending on how it is modified. So I can't really say much about that, and maybe there's another way to transfer it as well. After all, HiRez managed to transfer the game to various consoles, including the Switch, which has a bit of a different architecture from what I understand. So in that sense, I'm sure if they really wanted to, they could get it onto mobile. But that brings us to another question, and that is, would it be worth bringing Smite to mobile? Because at the end of the day, we know that the mobile market is huge. It's a lot of money that you could potentially make there, but that's only as long as you have games that are suitable for mobile as well. Now, I think Smite would be an appealing game for mobile, because games on mobile are getting more and more in-depth, I would say. They're getting more and more expansive simply because the phones are getting better, and therefore you can just almost run the same thing as on consoles at least. But at the same time, the navigation, the controls aren't always that easy, and a game like Smite requires a lot of commands that you would have to place very strategically on the UI to even make it usable, and it would be another story once again to actually make it visible and structured enough to be playable on a decent level. We've already seen steps in that direction for the Switch, with the new UI being bigger and everything like that. That kind of caters towards the portable version of the Switch as well, but still, playing Smite on the portable Switch is kind of already stretching it in terms of what's going on the screen, in my opinion. It's possible, but it's not the most pleasant experience. And as mobile screens are typically even smaller than that, I am not sure how well it will work. And if there's really enough of an audience that wants to play those kind of games on a phone as well, because at the end of the day, Smite matches typically aren't that short either. It would be very interesting to see, and it would be very interesting to see how it would work out as well if it becomes an option to play the game. And it would also be interesting if it would actually be used in crossplay as well, because that could be really, really rough. But at the end of the day, I am not so sure if the indication we get from this is something that we can take for a good chance of it being released on those platforms, or just HiRez leaving open the option to at some point in the future explore the possibility of creating a mobile version of Smite. But that is not all. On the first version of PTS that I was unfortunately unable to play, the Reddit user Nick Metchan found new guard information. That is for Set and Horus. Both of them were briefly available on PTS, and you could look at their images basically that they had, which in Set's case was a temporary image from an Anubis skin, and in Horus' case was a temporary image from a Ra skin. Now there is an important thing to note with these guards in the PTS state. They were actually playable, but they didn't have their own models yet. I think they used Thanatos and Loki, and they had some slightly janky abilities, but not really anything that was even remotely close to a finalized ability, so that part really isn't that important. And Ajax actually responded to the Reddit post as well. He said, "These guards are super early in development. No actual art assets are created yet, their abilities mostly didn't even function, and I wouldn't say anything is confirmed." The original poster of these images then asked if the classes and titles would be more likely to stay in the game, and Ajax said that the exact wording of titles is changed all the time, right up until launch sometimes, whereas the class is less likely to change, but it has happened during many dev cycles. So overall, take the information that is provided here with a big grain of salt, much like with data mining basically, even though this was more or less an official HiRez leak, even though this part of the leak is probably not an intended one as it was removed very, very quickly. Now, saying that, we can also see that Set is classified as an assassin here. With the current release cycle that we had, that doesn't seem unlikely. The last assassin that we had was Pele, which was in August 2018. And since then we had 2 mages, 1 warrior and 1 guardian once Jormungandr is released. So especially if Set gets released first, that would kind of work out with the cycle. The only class that would be missing here would be a hunter. It's been a bit longer since the last hunter with Chernobog, but HiRez doesn't always follow this strict order, which is also why we had quite a few mages as of late in between other releases. Based on that, for Horus, the class is a little bit less likely, being a warrior here, as our last warrior with King Arthur wasn't very long ago. Then again, you could argue that King Arthur wasn't a very archetypical warrior in his playstyle, and it's maybe more between a warrior and an assassin, and if Horus becomes more of a tanky warrior, he could fall into a completely different niche overall. Technically, if one of them was changed over to be a hunter, we would overall have a more balanced cycle of releases, but you also have to keep in mind that we've lost multiple warriors to being reclassified as assassins at this point. So the warrior class is kind of empty compared to many other classes, and that might mean that we get more warrior releases quicker than other classes to fill up that class a little bit. If we factor in the lore, then for Set, being an assassin seems like a very matching role. Being the god of disorder, violence, and foreignness, a god of chaos, that all kind of fits with the assassin theme. With Horus, it's less obvious because Horus is the god of the sky primarily, and a bird god essentially in his design, and that couldn't really be anything. It could actually also be an assassin from that style, it could be a hunter, it could be a warrior. Really, any option is open here because that's less defined in terms of what this does for his personality, and his personality is less described through what he is as a god. The in-game titles don't really give more pointers here either. Set is classified as the god of the red sands, so not really very telling overall. And Horus is classified as the god of the sky. Once again, we already have that theme in the mythology. Nothing we can get out of that would help us here. What is relatively likely is that both gods are going to remain physical, because otherwise a lot of their god designs so far would have to be changed around. And I can't really imagine them being in super early stages at this point. I think the version that we would see on PTS is an earlier one than the one they're currently working on. and those versions would probably be more fleshed out, and if they still change it over from physical to something else, that could be quite a lot of work down the road, so I kind of doubt that part. Let me know down in the comments which classes you would want them to be, and if you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button and move the bell, it really helps me out. And if you enjoyed the video, feel free to click the like button. Other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. Hope this was interesting and insightful. DukeSloth, out.